Hey, what's going on, guys? Aarava here, and welcome back to the Pitlane Podcast, episode 96 today with the usual hosts, myself, Aarav, Tom, and Cal, and we're here to discuss the news in Formula One before the Singapore Grand Prix. The news, getting into the news, like a Top Gear star fashion. But obviously the big news was the news we kind of semi-missed straight after the podcast. You know, the podcast curse continues, that every time we release an episode, the F1 world seems to just release the news straight away. We record usually the day before we release an episode, so we didn't actually technically miss it, we just literally didn't know it was going to happen. But obviously the big news was, when we released last week's podcast, was Lando Norris is going to be alongside Carlos Sainz at McLaren for 2019, and effectively obviously means that Van Dorn is out of his seat and is on the job seekers market in F1. Guys, what should we make of it? First of all, let's go with the Van Dorn being booted first, then we'll get to the new man. Van Dorn out of the seat. Do we reckon he's going to find somewhere? And if so, where? Where are we thinking?
It's slim because there are certain teams that he's been linked with, i.e. Toro Rosso, but he doesn't seem to fit in any other team, I think, obviously. Not like some drivers where it's like it's obvious that he's going to go there. There aren't any teams that scream out, apart from Toro Rosso. I mean, even Zach Brown has suggested him to go to Toro Rosso, which is slightly odd from a team boss when you've just fired your driver. But even after a week of them coming out going, our McLaren this year was probably one of the worst cars we've ever made, we're still going to sack Van Dorn, even though his chassis was, even telemetry proving that his chassis was slower than Fernando Alonso. So it came quite a shock. And it's another young driver that's been kind of axed unfairly. That maybe is probably the wrong word. I'm not sure. You are comparing him against a two-time world champion in the likes of Fernando Alonso. So it has been quite harsh on the face of it. But I still feel like he'll be able to scavenge a seat somewhere. Only if a team are desperate, though. I don't think he's the number one choice around on the rest of the grid.
I think I'm not surprised. It's one of them ones where it was, I don't know about you guys, but it was hard to be shocked in a way because it just felt like it was happening. And for me personally, I think it's not that it makes sense, but I can understand why they've done it. I've said it before in the podcast, qualifying records, race records, points scored. It speaks for itself. Ironically, his best performance in McLaren, you could argue, was his first when he wasn't even a driver for the team, which kind of says a lot. So, regardless of whether he's had a dodgy chassis or not, he's not really had a standout moment in the last 2 years, you could argue. So, as for Norris, who knows? What is interesting, though, we did discuss who would go to Toro Rosso, and all three of us said Norris would go to Toro Rosso. With him now being slingshot into McLaren, now you have to wonder who does go to the red and blue car. So, there is a chance it could be Van Dorn. There was also hints towards Van Dorn potentially going to IndyCar, which is very interesting. So, I'm not sure where I fall on this. I think, do I expect to see him on the grid next year? I don't think so.
It's going to be...
Don't ask me why, I just don't know. I ain't got that feeling.
He doesn't have the flair like other young drivers, I don't think. I mean, he had that's probably unfair to say because he did have an incredible... When he won the championship in GP2, he did have an incredible year, but he hasn't really rekindled that flair since in the McLaren, which has been quite a shame.
Which is the frustrating thing, because it's like his career's been killed by just going to McLaren for those 2 years. Because I think I tweeted out, and it's like you don't lose that speed, like raw speed, just in like 2 years flat. So it's just frustrating, and kind of like I hope that he could find a seat, but I'm kind of, with the same kind of mark of, you look at the driver market, you've got the other situations with Ocon, Mercedes, Toro Rosso, what they want to do, and he's not on he wouldn't be on the top of the shopping list for any of these teams, I don't think.
I mean, it's worth pointing out how, we did discuss this pre-podcast, but it's also worth mentioning how Kvyat is genuinely looking like a favourite to come back to Toro Rosso next year. Out of nowhere. So that also relegates him on the pecking order. I still think Hartley will stay, so you could argue Kvyat and Hartley could be the lineup for Toro Rosso next year. With Van Dorn, here's the thing, and this is the way I see it. I'd consider it harsh if he'd actually had a few good races, or ones where you say he absolutely slapped Alonso that weekend. but I can't think of a time of it happening once. Even if it was like somewhat close between the two of them. I know, yeah, he's been a couple of tenths off every qualifying, but that's the thing. He's been a couple of tenths off every single qualifying. If it was only a few races,
also
it's more 50-50.
The stats are interesting because technically he's actually done. Alonso is actually true when he says Van Dorn's done the best out of all his teammates, because actually the gap from Alonso to his teammates, Van Dorn's the top of the list of the least gap compared to Raikkonen, Button, all these older teammates, even Hamilton back when they raced together at McLaren. So the stats here and there do offer some positives for Van Dorn, but yeah, like you say, the actual end of the day track record is he's been beaten how many of the times in qualifying and how many of the times in the race, and you just look at the points difference as well, and yeah, just it's unfortunate. You need, like, for when it's a situation like this, when you've got that kind of, you're fired like that and you've got to find a seat, you do need those standout moments, and Van Dorn does not have that in his arsenal to catch the eye. At the same time, though, like you mentioned with the Kvyat-Hartley thing, obviously, yeah, if Kvyat has a real good shot, it could be Kvyat and Hartley, which in its own right, I don't know about you two. Do you think that's a good lineup, Kvyat-Hartley?
I think regarding Hartley and Kvyat, it's going to be interesting because as I think they're both labelled in the F1 world as kind of reject drivers. Hartley went off the scene for years and then randomly came up and everyone went who. And Kvyat has been in and out of Toro Rosso so many times. Toro Rosso has made him their bitch, and for some reason Kvyat is still reciprocating. He's still going, yeah, give me an F1 driver. I'd love to be back in. And fair enough, yeah, he's a racing driver, but the way they've treated Kvyat is quite bad. It is pretty bad. So it is going to be interesting because that will motivate each other to become the number one driver. When you've got two number twos, both of them will be pushing extremely hard to become the number one driver. And on the face of it, I wouldn't even know which way it'd swing, because obviously Hartley's been in the car more. Obviously he's been in all season, but Kvyat obviously has had previous experience in the team. So there is that pendulum, and it could hopefully benefit Toro Rosso with both of them pushing each other just as hard at the start of next year.
I've got nothing to add here. I'm not really sure where I fall on this. I think it'd be a good lineup for two drivers that need a bit of stability.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much where my thoughts lie.
Toro Rosso going to 2019 is definitely the stability team in terms of, like, they're not the ones that are changing engine. They're going to have the same engine as this year, so it's kind of more of a, yeah, you put it, also they say it's Toro Rosso, like they're not going to, unless something crazy happens with their new technical partnership with Red Bull, they're not going to jump up the order probably like Haas. So yeah, it's kind of one of those things where it's like if Kvyat and Hartley went there, sure, for them career-wise be fine. Does kind of take away a seat, unfortunately, from someone like Van Dorn, but that's how the cookie crumbles sometimes.
Yeah.
Interesting enough, though,
we've got that issue anyway with other drivers, but even trying to bring the new talent in. I mean, there's already Lando Norris has already been promoted, and fair play to McLaren. Even though McLaren, everyone did kind of wince when Norris was announced, because it's, oh my god, it's McLaren, or it's their driver program. It's not a Red Bull one where it has proven success. I mean, there's been Lewis Hamilton, and that's kind of about it, really.
And even then, that was so different, so different.
Yeah, that's a different world. Like, they've nurtured him. Like, I think he was probably the only driver in the driver program, whereas other drivers such as Perez, well, not Perez wasn't one of them, but he's another driver that's been axed quickly.
The arguments were Perez and Magnussen both went to McLaren as younger drivers and nearly had their careers ruined, somehow came back into F1. That's also other people's arguments. I guess McLaren fans are arguing, well, Perez and Magnussen are still here in F1, aren't they? But the thing is, you don't get that lucky every single time. 2 out of 3 maybe. The third one, what's the bet? Norris is going to get that. So, but at the same time, Norris also, the way he's spoken about it, he's kind of, he's got a clever head on some calmer shoulders in terms of, I think he knows what he's stepping into. Obviously, he's very familiar with the McLaren family, but I think he definitely knows he's stepping into what is probably going to be a very difficult car and not a great situation.
Yeah.
But like Ricciardo, he's also accepted it's a longer-term plan. But how many times have we said this on the podcast? How many times have we, as three, gone through on the podcast about McLaren's long-term plan? And, maybe it'll pay off in 5 races' time or a season's time. And it just has never happened now.
They had a plan back in 2013 and, pretty much end of 2012, 2013, and they haven't returned since. So their long-term plan, is a little bit void.
Yeah,
probably the right word. But I mean, I was going to say that Norris, he knows what he's getting into, but the same thing with Van Dorn, he kind of knew what he was getting into as well. He moved into the team at the peak of where Honda and McLaren were pretty much over and done with. So they've both been at the same sort of position, but the best thing for Norris is he's a lot younger than Van Dorn. I didn't realise how old Van Dorn was compared to Norris.
He's not a young driver.
No, not at all. I still think of him as a young driver, but he isn't. He's far from it.
Like a young spring chicken.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, Norris is 18, isn't he?
Yeah, he's 18. So
he's the youngest driver that can enter the sport at the minute. So he is quite the fresh face, and I think it's also good, as commented on Norris himself. It's good to see another Brit on the grid, because we've only had Hamilton on the grid for a long time now.
Exactly.
And the last Brit obviously was Button, but it's not been common to have too many Brits on. And this is quite patriotic, but it's not been common to have too many. But in the past, we've had at least 4 with the likes of, let's choose a year when there was Hamilton, Button. We had a Chilton on the grid. We had a Paul di Resta. So it's nice to see another Brit come through, and he's going to get a lot of the Brit media on his side, because he's going to have a lot of pressure from it all, because everyone's going, hey, look, it looks like Lewis Hamilton again coming through.
Straight away, comparisons have already been made, so that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
But McLaren as a whole in 2019 will be interesting. Obviously, Carlos Sainz alongside, so literally the last time they did this, where they swapped out and had a clean start with a Spaniard and a rookie, was back when they signed Alonso and Hamilton. So... Well, that time, obviously, it kind of half worked out for them eventually in the second year when the Spaniard left. Let's see what happens with McLaren this time. Obviously, it's going to be a lot harder for them to actually do something. But I don't know. What do you make of that pairing, Sainz and Norris? Do you reckon? Okay, obviously the car's going to hinder them a little bit, but do you think that's a good pairing for a team like McLaren?
I don't really know.
Because I
don't really know how to comment on it.
Because Sainz isn't exactly a veteran yet. I wouldn't call him a veteran. He's still, he's had like 4 years under his belt, but he's not exactly like a team leader yet, I don't think. Obviously, he'll basically become one because he's the more experienced out of him and Norris.
Yeah.
But
it's going to be hard to comment. You can't. That's probably one of the most phantom kind of partnerships going. You really don't know what's going to happen. I mean, Sainz seemed quite laid back. I don't think he's ever really had issues with teammates, apart from maybe Verstappen, but that was in his debut year. So he's matured a little bit, and his working relationship with other teammates has been fairly decent as well. And Norris, I think he's just good. I think Norris might try and rattle Sainz just to make it known that he's the number one, because he's been in the team longer, but Sainz has had more years in Formula 1. So again, it's going to be that battle of who's the number one driver. But I don't know what Tom, I don't know what you think, because I'm like in the dark.
What does the Spaniard think of the Spaniard?
I really don't really care much about the lineup, to be fair. There's nothing to really work with, in my opinion. I'm more thinking about what's going on behind the scenes. I think interesting move, Pat Fry going back to the team. First time since he fell out with Whit Marsh. It's a very interesting move. Back then, McLaren were competitive. He last worked for Manor, and last time Manor in the sport, you could argue it was their best season ever. So who knows? There could be some life still in the old man. He could potentially bring something to them. Along with, it looks like James Key's probably going to come next season now for them, because there's been some, according to the reports, there's been some tricky issues with the contract. So then get James Key and Pat Fry on the team for next season again. Personally, since they've announced this inverted commas reshuffle, so far, everything they've been doing seems good to me. Getting Sainz, a solid driver, getting Norris in, very exciting long-term prospect, shuffling the staff around, getting rid of Boulier, who in my opinion didn't really bring nothing to them, even though we understand it wasn't all entirely his fault, but I still think there's been no difference with him or without him. And also making the right appointments. And I think, Zach Brown did say 2 to 10 years, so just look at it that way.
10 years, that's a long time to wait.
But the steps they're taking are the right ones, I think. Getting Alonso out of the team, inverted commas, because he's still with them, kind of, if you know what I mean. But not him driving next year is a good thing, in my opinion, in the sense that it takes eyes off of them a bit. I think Alonso, as much as I like him, he brings bad attention to McLaren. When you're wasting talent like that, whereas you could almost give that patience excuse a bit more stretch with Sainz and Norris saying that they've got as much time as McLaren have when it comes to their careers, whereas Alonso needed results now. That's where the sort of pressure lied.
I mean, same thing almost like
Van Dorn also. I mean, even he needed a bit of performance to save his job. So they won't have that factor of, instant results. So I think they've set themselves up nicely for at least an improvement for next year. I mean, it can't really get any worse, can it?
Well, hopefully not. I mean, they've said they're not gone backwards. They just haven't gone forwards. But when you're not going forwards in F1, you are going backwards because everyone else is developing, and they've come out and said that other teams are just out developing them. So, I mean, at least they've admitted it. Really, because up till now they just don't really admit when they're wrong. I think this year with the reshuffle, they're definitely starting to just admit, we've got it quite wrong here. We need a lot of work to reshuffle things. And I think it can be like that kind of quiet in the dark thing, almost like kind of what Ferrari had to do to kind of get back at Merc in recent years, kind of stop talking to media, stop being so flamboyantly Italian in a way, and just do the work in the background.
Getting rid of a big personality sometimes helps. I think the best move Ferrari made in the V6 era was getting rid of James Allison. And that's my big call. I think ever since they've got rid of him, they've not looked back. They've really done really well. I think sometimes you need to take a risk. I think McLaren, getting rid of Boulier, shuffling the staff around, making the crucial changes, getting rid of both of their drivers. It's a sort of risk you have to take, and sometimes it pays off. I do think McLaren will start turning the corner. I genuinely do believe that. I get a really good vibe of they've accepted, like you mentioned, Aarav, that they've just done things wrong, and I think they're looking to really do things right again. But like I said, 2 to 10 years. So
well, talking about taking risks, let's go to the other side of like the driver program kind of thing with the driver market. There's been still talk ongoing about what on earth is happening with Ocon, also George Russell. As soon as Lando Norris was announced, immediately people were like, but what about George Russell? What's going to happen to him? Because he's technically the leader. Well, not technically, he is the leader in F2, and he's won more races recently than Norris has in the last 5 months, and he's been making, as they say in the headlines, a bulletproof CV for getting into F1. What on earth do Merc do? Because they've got Ocon to try and find, and then if Russell, I think I said it in a previous podcast a few races ago, if he wins, obviously, F2, he can't stay in F2. So it's almost in kind of a case of, for the sake of him just being able to keep his racing craft up in a way, like, you almost, obviously, he's going to probably go out and try and win it. He will. But almost a kind of way of, please don't win it so we can keep you in F2 just because we don't know where to put you, for God's sake, because there's not many seats left.
Especially with... Well, the issue is, because someone has bought a team, that's one seat already taken.
Exactly, yeah.
And then you've got certain people with quite other bits of money as well, i.e. a certain Sergio Perez. But you look down, I'm looking down the rest of the team list now, and Force India is probably going to be out because it's probably going to be Stroll and Perez, even though Perez is linked with Haas, which would probably make sense for Perez.
I would like to see Perez go to Haas. I think he could do some great work at Haas with Magnussen.
But Perez and Magnussen as teammates might be a bit fireworky.
Frosty.
Yeah. I don't think that would work. And then you look at other teams, like you've got Williams, which I think Sorokin's staying. I want to say he's staying for next year. But you've only got one other spot. But then you've got...
I think Ocon to Williams is a very underrated shout. I think it would be a much better move than people think. I honestly do.
I hope he goes there. Because that's the only place he can go now.
Well, Williams, for me, especially after Italy, seems to be turning a corner. They seem to be taking next year's regulations very seriously. Paolo saying it's the biggest rate change since 2009. And we know what happens if Williams take a regulation change seriously, like they proved in 2014. Even if they start declining afterwards, it would save Ocon for a season or two. So, I don't think it's that bad of a shout. You've got a very strong lineup in Sorokin and Ocon, in my opinion. Sorokin, for me, I've always said I liked him. He's improving a lot lately.
I'm with you there.
Him alongside Ocon can maybe push him to the next level. Also, I do feel like I said, I just feel like Williams are starting to really understand the car and turn the corner a bit. And a double points finish in Monza deserves credit. And I think if you look at the start of the season, they've definitely improved. You could say, okay, it's Monza, a power circuit, but
that's what I was about to say. The real test will be Singapore. Let's
of course, but let's not forget, and they've made it very clear this season. They went for a downforce car, and the problem with their car this season is that by trying to pursue a car that's good at downforce, which they absolutely failed at, they also lost their speed in the straights. So they basically lost everything, hence why their car was so poor this year. So I still think it was a great performance from them at Monza.
You can't fault them, and especially, and to be fair, even with Stroll and Sorokin at the minute, that's still a solid lineup. Like Stroll is, it's decent. Like I don't think he deserves to be off the grid, even though he has bought a seat pretty much.
He put a shift in at Monza, so.
He has put a shift in, and some of his starts this season have been.
Like, I mean, his starts
he's been the best. He's been the best.
His starts have been crazy.
But in terms of just the rest of the driver market, I mean, Red Bull have made it quite clear that they're not going to take any Mercedes.
That as well. Yeah, same with McLaren. They were saying that's why they didn't want to take Ocon because he was affiliated with Mercedes. So that was a bit iffy for them. So really, I think if Russell wins F2, I think Russell's going to be confined to a third driver slot at Mercedes, basically. Take a year out.
Which
hopefully not lose his racecraft. Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully not.
And then maybe in 2020 find a seat with a bit of more of a reshuffle with Ocon, and then maybe Russell can shuffle into what seat Ocon vacates by Ocon hopefully moving up the order in the grid or whatever. I don't know, but.
Well, the whole thing that this has now caused is a massive conversation about whether or not we need some more teams. And one bit of news that came out is in 2021, the rules were specifically made in 2021 so that it attract other manufacturers such as Porsche, such as Aston Martin, and no one's taken the bait. Not a single manufacturer has gone, yeah, I fancy that. So that's that one out the window. And then everyone was going, oh no, now everyone will need 3-car teams. And then we've all realised that no, Formula 1's too expensive, we need to start capping the costs, and that's just not possible. So we need some more teams, we need to attract the independents, which
I think
leads us back down to cost capping.
I think at Crux it's just going to be good though, eventually, that getting that budget cap in. I think like everything else in typical F1 fashion can probably fudged towards what the teams want, but I really hope what does get pushed through is that budget cap. That will be a really big thing. I think that all three of us have said before that would be really good. Like we've talked so many times about money in the sport, so that would be important.
Because then Ferrari, if they had a 3-car team, they could keep Raikkonen and they could just get McLaren. And then
well, on that note, I'm really hoping that we don't have a podcast curse of Leclerc being announced on Tuesday when we release this podcast. But there's been strong rumours that Ferrari were meant to announce him literally last week, never did. The Ferrari fans are getting impatient. You've got half the Ferrari fans doing petitions to keep Raikkonen because they already believe that he's been booted out. You've got the other half waiting for Leclerc's announcement. It's all very wishy-washy. Hopefully it does get sorted before Singapore. Hopefully not straight away on the Tuesday we release this video. Maybe Thursday would be good. F1, please, Ferrari. But it's to be honest, it's been very funny the last couple of weeks talking this much about driver market changes because in F1 we actually don't get actual stuff happening. We have rumours, but none of it actually happens all the time. Whereas this is actual genuine, all these rumours about Stroll, Perez, this team and that team, all that shuffling we heard before Monza. It could happen.
People were watching the podcast in the last 3 years. You'll know that in the first 2 seasons of this podcast, we spoke a little bit about driver markets, and that was about it. I don't think we have ever spoke so much about the driver market. It's because it's been probably the most hotly contested driver market in years. I'm trying to remember the last year where it's been this juicy, and I can't think of a year since I started watching the sport in 2008/9. I can't remember the last time it was this spicy.
This many drivers involved.
Yeah, I've just never seen it before. Not maybe just because we had a team been bought and we've had this, that and the other, and driver markets have been the driver programs have been so popular with the manufacturers.
There's still a lot to be completed. It has potential to be the craziest ever. There's still a lot of things that need to fall into place, in my opinion. Like Leclerc, Raikkonen alone would be a massive switch. The whole Toro Rosso thing still remains to be seen. Force India, Williams, Haas. There's still a lot of potential things that could happen. So nothing could happen at all. That's what I'm saying. nothing else could change from what we have right now. If you know what I mean.
We know at least.
I think if it did,
I think if it that's what's a bit more.
Yeah, but that's like the worst kept secret of all time.
I think we're in a situation if it doesn't change from what it is now, that in itself would be bonkers, because then a lot of it doesn't make sense if it stay the way it is right now.
I have a suggestion. I think there's a debate here of, is there too much talent for the current F1 grid? Because like you look at all these young drivers, and obviously going back before about the 3-car team rule, I do think there is something in that. I know people were quick to shut down Toto Wolff's point and say, it doesn't benefit the smaller teams or whatever. I think if the FIA are so hell-bent and so determined to want to try and get things to work the right way, I'd be all for a third car if the FIA fund it so that every team can have it. And I would use it as a wild card rule, so you can only have like 3 a season, or 4 or 5 maybe max, because we've got 20 races, so maybe like 5 wild cards a season, and you can pick what races you want your third car to be run, and that driver has to be a young driver from the academy, or someone with like 2 years of experience in like racing or something, I don't know. But basically, I think that if they tweaked it, it could work. So for example, Russell could race in Mercedes, Norris could race in McLaren alongside Van Dorn and Alonso, Leclerc and Ferrari, Gio and Sauber alongside Ericsson or someone else. I don't even know how that would even work out. Get someone at Toro Rosso. You could maybe promote Kvyat to Red Bull for one race. Yeah. So I think it'd be interesting, but I think the FA would have to supply that third car and like fund it for what it's worth the race weekends.
Yeah.
But I think that would be a possibility, because doing 3 to 5 races a season means it's not that expensive. It's not a whole season, and the FA could probably cover that cost, and it still gives everyone the option of doing that.
Just you've just got a slight fear of making it a bit board gamey. With like, I'm going to use my wild card this weekend. Like,
but they do it MotoGP all the time. It's not. I've seen it in person.
The only issue is with it. I mean, even with, because people have come up with ideas that the third car won't score any points for the team, it'll only be for the driver, or this, that, and the other. But then that means that what if a third car Mercedes takes out the number 1 Ferrari? That's
the risk you take, in my opinion. I think that would add to. That would add to it. You're going to risk running your third car and having a massive team implosion.
That wouldn't. If you ran your third car, then that wouldn't affect you. If the third Mercedes car took out Vettel, for example, could you imagine the uproar if that happened? Literally, Ferrari. Well, I mean, Ferrari fans have been trying to make petitions to keep Kimi in the sport, so I think they'd do anything. God knows what they'd do if they said that. It's just a bit. I feel like it'd cause too much controversy. I'd rather they just have a third car, keep it all season, and let it score points. I feel like that'd just make more sense. Just have bigger teams. For example, in IndyCar, where there are 4-car teams, 3-car teams, 2-car teams, just dependent on how much money they've got. But I don't know. It's an interesting one, which I feel like Ross Brawn and the fellow boffins need to fine-tune.
Or, like to stop people being booted out of F2 when they win a championship. Maybe let them redo the championship. But if you're a champion, you have to start at the back of the grid every single race for the next season. Just keep them in, because then it just solves too many talents coming through F2, winning the championship, and then having nowhere to go.
Yeah, not a bad idea.
I don't know. Just throwing out another bonkers idea.
But we'll see. Probably find out next time on Driver Market News. But
we're going to talk about the Singapore Grand Prix.
Singapore GP to talk about. Yes.
Yeah. So predictions. Obviously, it's a big one for Ferrari because they need, or more so, Vettel needs to bounce back for the championship's sake. Obviously, historically, Mercedes have always played it off as a bogey circuit for them. Red Bull, in theory, should be very strong around there as well. So it's going to be hopefully a very intriguing one. Obviously, last year we had a pretty crazy one on lap 1, and then it kind of subdued.
Race was pretty nutty just because it was a wet race. I remember we had that strange scenario where the rain wouldn't disappear off the track, so we were waiting for a track to dry in for basically half the Grand Prix. And other scenarios, we had some good overtakes as well.
And some good results.
I wouldn't mind a slight sprinkle, for example, with Carlos Sainz. But I wouldn't mind another slight sprinkle just to keep it exciting. But, I don't have hopes for Mercedes because I'd still don't. I feel like this car might struggle more than last year's car. I don't know why. I feel like just because Ferrari are so strong, and Singapore was always that offset one where it'd bring the rest of the field back closer to them.
Yeah.
I feel like now, obviously with Ferrari basically being the fastest car on the grid, I feel like Mercedes will drop back more.
I'm really
more
hoping that they drop back to the point where Red Bull can have a real scrap with them, maybe, and like you have
I'd
Ferrari.
like to see Ferrari versus Red Bull. That'd be nice to see.
That would be nice as well. I think Ferrari's maybe got a little bit extra in the tank that they can still deploy on straights and just generally momentum of the strategy as well to maybe have it over Red Bull. But also at the same time, I mean, Red Bull could be Red Bull. Sometimes they've been so bipolar, they just turn up and literally, oh, geez, look how much time they're getting in the corners. So it's going to be an interesting one to call. So in terms of calling it, predictions then, guys. Let's go with pole position. Cal, do you want to go first?
I'll say Vettel.
Vettel. Thomas?
I don't know what I'm going to say.
Right, I'll go with Vettel as well. Thomas?
I mean, after his pole lap last year, which was pretty much probably one of the best pole laps I've ever seen around Singapore.
I've just got a bad feeling about Red Bull being really quick.
Okay, so one of the Red Bulls then, maybe?
Ricciardo said today he's like along the same vibe of Monaco, saying, "It's my time now. I need to win this." Same sort of that tone of he's been the podium for the last 4 years. He wants to get that win. So I don't know. I know what I want to happen, but what I think will happen is a different story. I think Kimi's going to get pole again.
Okay, we'll go with that.
I think he's in an incredible bit of form.
Cool.
I'm sorry.
All right, so race then, top 5. What are we thinking, lads? Cal, do you want to go again?
I'll say, I feel like Vettel's going to bring it back. I feel like he's going to do that thing that a lot of world champions do, where they have a bit of a patchy spell and then they just get their head down and they just fight at it. So I'll say Vettel, Ricciardo, Raikkonen, and then we'll see a Hamilton, Verstappen.
All right.
Massive guess there.
Massive, yeah. Tom, do you want to go with the top 5?
Vettel has to win. So I'll say Vettel, Raikkonen, Ricciardo, Hamilton, Bottas, and Verstappen's going to bin it.
Ooh, okay, I'm going to go with Vettel, Verstappen, 2nd place, Raikkonen 3rd, Hamilton 4th, Bottas 5th. Ricciardo has another issue. Again.
Ooh.
I'm gonna really, he's said he's leaving.
Again.
He's said he's leaving the team. It's a bad omen now for the rest of the season. He'll have a lot of bad luck.
He's been given the RB13 again.
Yeah, that's just what happens.
It's just like, that's the thing that's going to annoy us though. Could you imagine if one of the Red Bulls retire, like in the lead?
Oh,
like we wait for it all of this time.
Yeah, if they're leading, they retire. That'll be so frustrating to see.
If Ricciardo's leading in a Red Bull and retires, he'll go, "Thank fuck, I'm getting out of this team."
If he retires after leading,
I think he already is.
If he retires after 60% of leading that Grand Prix at Singapore,
and it's a Red Bull issue.
Just
not
like,
even a Renault issue.
Like it was at Monza. Just like, you know what, lads? Just give Gasly the seat right now. I'll just sit out.
Off my holidays. See you later, boys.
Yeah, in a bit. Enjoy your Asian period.
Yeah, we mentioned it last podcast. Definitely was very embarrassing for Red Bull, like to have it be their issue this time around. They have no one else to blame for the Monza issue, but. Yeah, I mean, like we just said, it's going to be a crucial Singapore Grand Prix for Ferrari and Vettel's title chances. We were saying already after Hungary that there's this X amount of points gap. He's done it before, but now we're, 2 races later and it's a gap similar. So it's now really crunch time for the German.
This is going to be the biggest. How can I put it? If Hamilton's ever going to bin it, it's this race because of the nature of the circuit.
And I don't think he will.
And I don't think he will.
It will be a car issue, if anything, that retires him. He's had some bad luck at Singapore with car issues.
Genuinely don't want to see a car issue on Hamilton. If whoever wins the championship, want to see him win it fair and square. Ultimately, people will still say, "Oh, Hamilton breaking down earlier on in the season, that still cost him a championship." I couldn't care less. Right now, they've both had a retirement on paper apiece. One was driver related, the other one was car related. from now on, I just want it to be
straight fight to the end.
Straight fight.
Yeah, I think that's what the sport needs, because I think there's been too much deciding with the retirement. I mean, it's always been a case in motorsport.
I mean, it's dramatic, but you want to see it just play out.
Ideally, you want to see it head to head, but we'll see how we go. I feel like if there's a bit of rain, that'll spice it, but knowing Singapore, we're probably not going to see rain in another 10 years.
It's the first time we saw rain, so I highly doubt it, to be honest.
It ain't going to be it, Chief.
Yeah, it's not going to be it, but that's going to be the Singapore preview then, and we'll catch you then, guys, for the podcast to review the Singapore Grand Prix. Until then, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Obviously, if you like what we do around here, you can support us on Patreon. There's a link below. Let me just quickly check, actually. I don't think there was actually any questions apart from... Oh, someone asked, could we record the podcast faster so that we could jinx ourselves and Leclerc news could be announced?
Yeah, we basically wanted to see Leclerc be announced.
Greg, if this has happened, I'm going to blame you. I'm going to come into our Discord and I'll blame you straight away if Leclerc gets announced straight away after I upload this video.
Can I just put this out there? I've just looked on my phone, Singapore. Rain today, rain tomorrow, rain Thursday, rain Friday, rain Saturday, rain Sunday, rain Monday, rain Tuesday, rain Wednesday, rain the following Thursday. And that's the maximum. I can't go any further.
Couldn't you have just said rain for the next 8 days?
For the next, yeah.
If you don't get the message, it's raining for the next week and a half.
Okay, interesting.
Okay, so basically that means we know it's not going to rain for the race then.
Exactly, that's the point I'm getting at. It's going to rain just after the race.
On that bombshell, it's time to end. You can catch us on audio, iTunes, SoundCloud. Appreciate all you listening. If you want to get a racing share, you can check out GT Omega and use the code PitlaneF1 for a 5% off. If you like what we're doing around here, get subscribed to the podcast. Like I said, you can support us on Patreon. If you really like what we're doing around here, check us out on Twitter. Links on the screen right now throughout the entire podcast. They've been like there. And we'll see you guys for that review of the completely dry as Gandhi's flip-flop Grand Prix for Singapore. Till then, hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.